That's, thank you very
Okay, we
much.
hear it now, so we know. Now we have to stop talking.
I'm a newbie. Let's see if I can do this guy. You can see that,
Yeah.
right?
That
Yeah.
did it.
I'm not going to put it in presentation mode because it gets lost and I'm not sure which screen I've got it on. So we'll just deal with this.
That works fine.
Yeah.
Big enough. Okay, cool.
Sometimes it's better. We can kind of,
Yeah,
because you can see whether you're one slide ahead or one slide back.
exactly. Let's go here. Let's go here. I think we've got folks coming on.
Penn Sinclair, that sounds like a rock and roll song. One slide up, one slide back.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
man.
it's like learning how to dance, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Step, step, slide, step, step, slide.
We can make that a country western song, just tied into a pickup truck, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Dog dies, yeah.
All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes. I think we've got a few folks. I am doing the Anto duty today, so I'm Arno, aka Anto. So it's okay if you confuse me today. I won't be charging you guys at all. Just FYI, Anto is dealing with a bit of a medical emergency, so he's asked me to step in. So I do apologize for that up front. Okay, let's get started. Monday Live, for those of you who know us. If you do know, a bunch of panelists who expose our views on everything to do with smart buildings and the application thereof. Everything that the actual panelists themselves, you can find on mondaylive.org. Go, please sign up and have a look there. Again, our views are all personal and not of any one organization. So we believe we are wise and insightful people who've got valuable opinions for people to hear, right, guys? But post your questions directly into Zoom as well, and we'll be able to answer those. And you'll see this deck is on monday.live. And I did ask me at the last moment to sort of step in here, so I have actually kind of used the old deck. I have got your slide, Ken, and added a couple of mine as well. I have a tree muncher going on in the background, so if it's a bit noisy, I might go on mute in a little second. The subject for April that we started last week, of course, the cloud and buildings. I think we're focused on the business value of why the cloud makes sense for smart buildings and the technologies that we do. And so, in fact, this title is wrong. This is actually last week's title. So I think with that, I'll hand it over to Ken. Some initial content.
Okay, thank you, Anno. Things are going well, with automated buildings. This is the week of ControlCon, so it's happening Thursday, Friday of this week. We click on there, you can see what's going down. It's the theme of the session is the dawn of a new era. And I've written a piece on that, and I'm working on a video for the conference. So we're hoping that'll all come together. But an exciting gathering of folks dealing with what's going to be behind the new dawn. This article that we have on our site, it's actually the middle one over there. That's the hidden build industry of the smart buildings. It starts off with, while Silicon is laying off thousands of workers, we need those workers, and we should be glamorizing our industry so we can attract them. This was put together. I find it kind of interesting because it's put together from a company from New Zealand that's one of our sponsors, and he employs a Canadian, one of our contributing editors, Brad White, who of course I'm pretty familiar with. So we're kind of sandwiching the US in between New Zealand. The colonists are coming to get you, I guess. But anyway, it's a good message. And he's basically talking about how we have to glamorize our industry, because when we tell people what it is we do, we don't do a very good job of it. And so if you listen to Brad's talk, he talks about decarbonization and change, saving the world, and a lot of things that are more appealing to the younger crowds. And he is also in the business of procuring people for his company. And I just met with him last week, and we were talking about that, and just the difference dynamic in hiring people is just amazing. The whole idea of not being too particular about what it is you want the person to do, because they may actually bring you skills you couldn't even imagine. And also a comment that I thought was interesting is that having onerous requirements for educational requirements is a difficulty in this occasion, because we have a lot of self-trained people that have amazing skills they can bring to our service. So allowing them to define what it is they can do for you is actually a good start. So I was just some interesting tips as to how they're thinking and what they're doing to attract people. So that was a good one. Our contributing editor, Nicholas Warren from Sweden, he's a big Chat GPT fan. He says that at least the rest of your employees should be Chat GPT. He sets it to work and sets out, and he comes back with this visionary world that the pioneers stood triumphant. So take a read of that. You can kind of see the picture that got drawn there as well. It's a different world for sure. So anyway, exciting stuff happening. I think our industry is becoming extremely exciting and has a lot of appeal. And I think we need to all do that, basically get that message out. And this particular article on us as the hidden industry was picked up well by several others, and it's trending extremely well for us. So please take a look at it and see if you can use it to attract people to your business. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Ken. I got to echo the, they're trying to get workforce resources in smart buildings. You've got here from the system integrators to even developers like us. Getting good, knowledgeable people is not a trivial exercise, even though like you say, the Silicon Valley people are laying off thousands. And one of the drums that I keep beating, competing for those resources, of course, a lot of these IoT companies, and they're getting quite good at what they're doing, and their technology is getting quite significant. And so they're really upping their game, and as a result, they're also attracting a lot of the good talent into the space as well. And just sort of on that, in fact, if you haven't seen it, the Unisu, however you want to pronounce it, these guys do a lot of great reports out there. They kind of do the top ranking in our space as far as smart building technologies are concerned. They've got a very strong, very wide range of topics that they cover. It's a very simple report, kind of like, here's your top 20. What was the change from the last time they did the report? They typically do reports once a quarter. As you can see here, this is a Q1 report from 2023. This is a Q2, a Q4, and a Q4 report. And they kind of give you a change, from where those companies were from the previous quarter. And then they do a quick sort of short bio of each company, CEO, what their message is. Great. It's actually a really good resource. If you want to go, so I picked some of the ones that are kind of interesting from my perspective, top 20 smart building software companies. Very interesting if you go and look, actually, whoops, okay. Whoop, there it is. Very interesting from if you go there and look at who those top 20 are, not one of the 4 that you would probably start to think about. Most of these guys are not the sort of folks that you've you would have thought from a smart building software company perspective. Same thing with the data analytics guys. If you look at the improving CRE data analytics type top 20 list, again, lots of folks that you may not have recognized in the past, and of course the digital twin is still getting some traction out there, and the players there are changing. All right, not sure why I'm losing it, but so interesting reports. It's a great website if you just want to do the top 20 and get an intro to who's there. I'm going to jump down to Rick. Oh, cool! You did some updates. Thanks, mate.
Like in real time, I did. Yes.
In real time, yeah. Well done.
On the other computer that's sitting right over here. It's funny how that works, but yeah, the first part, the collaborations, the meetings that we're or the events that we're having and attending. I'm just going to update that every week when there is an update. There wasn't this time. Also, the Young Professionals Group, I think they've had their second meeting and they are ready to start entertaining the idea of more folks joining. So reach out to Monica if you are in that category. The other thing that we're doing is we're getting serious about trying to bring in resources into the coalition to help do further work on the different segments or the different objectives that we've got. And so we're getting mission statements and details of what we would do if we had more resources. We're getting all that together. And then one specific thing that we're working on is what I'm calling defining the problem and quantifying the problem of the fact that we don't have enough smart buildings, or the buildings that we have aren't smarter. What problems does that cause economically? What problems does that cause socially? And we're putting together an outline for that. So that means, Ken, you're finally going to have a post from the coalition to say this is what we're up to. Don't give me a deadline though, Ken.
Okay.
Well, with Ken's new model, deadlines don't mean the exact thing they used to, right?
What it means though is it doesn't get done. I may have to go back to deadlines.
Touche.
Cool. Thanks, Rick.
Anno,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Because you were not at the Wednesday meeting, we decided what we're going to talk about in May. So I'm going to post we're going to talk about climate change for the month of May.
Okay.
And I'm going to post a real interesting graphic presentation about global warming. So I'll just stick that on the board here right now on the chat.
Do that. Cool. So some interesting links. There's actually a lot going on in the next couple of months, as Ken said. Controls Con going on right now. Haystack Connect and coming up in June. Realcomm IBCon in June as well. So a lot of interesting stuff going on as far as the industry is concerned as well. Anything else? Anyone else want to add any other thoughts, general observations for the week?
Yeah, I had one. I had started to add a slide and then got a call and I couldn't finish, but I try to kind of keep things up to date in regards to the semiconductor market and the QSR space, restaurant space. But over the weekend, there was a new report that came out regarding the semiconductor space, which we have seen just fall off a cliff here after Q4, basically of last year. We had orders pushed out, 70 or 80% of our orders were pushed out about a year or so. But over the weekend, there was a new report that a couple of the big players, specifically Lam Research and ASML, came out and said they're expecting an earlier rebound than originally anticipated, that they thought by Q4 things would be turning around. And this was driven largely by consumption of semiconductors in China. And the demand is growing significantly in China as far as consumers, let alone manufacturing capability. So, which is counter to the problem of shipping, certain things over there. This was mostly the non-restricted stuff is what they were citing. And then they did cite new legislation that's pulling fabs into the US and fabs into Europe to be less reliant on an Asian marketplace, let's say. So.
Yeah, I was wondering when you said that it turned down, because I thought there's a large Biden initiative, right, to bring.
Yeah, it
fab
just
back.
hasn't, this is a correction because of the
Okay.
pandemic, right? Everybody, the supply chain got interrupted, manufacturing got slowed down. So there's kind of legitimate problems that were caused by the pandemic. And then you layer on top of that an overzealous purchasing community trying to make up for the gaps, make up for the shortages by ordering more than they needed. It kind of created this sort of artificial demand along with inflated inventories, right?
Okay.
So now everybody's got to work that inventory off. The inflated demand is going to kind of work itself out. So I would have expected this to be, 4 quarters, kind of a correction. And now we're finally starting to see some data that kind of supports that this is a temporary problem. The industry overall is solid, and supply chains are coming back, in line. So getting parts for doing stuff that we do should be much better. So.
Okay, cool. I also saw a report too, in that the actual fab generation technology of the fabs are changing. There's a new generation. Yeah, it used ultraviolet high. It's the next level of density that's going on, and everyone's waiting. And there's only like one place in the Netherlands that makes this machine, and they're all waiting desperately to. It can't ship out enough of them either. Apparently, that's part of the challenge too. So there's a change going on in the industry. All right, thanks.
Yeah, it's going to shuffle out. It'll be interesting to see this when it's all done. So.
Okay, any other thoughts?
So I've noticed, and I'm curious if the rest of my colleagues have noticed this, that there seems to be a increasing number of articles or pieces in the media about the corporate and real estate market really starting its slide. In other words, I'm really seeing this, more articles. For example, a major developer in New York City is still optimistic, but basically their tenants, as far as leases and stuff, is off a significant amount. I saw where Austin now is following, or is it following Silicon Valley, in that people are moving out of Austin and going to the suburbs, or people are cutting back on the square footage in downtown Austin, which kind of surprises to me because Austin's on fire with respect to development and so forth and so on. So over the last week, I've seen about 10 to 12 articles kind of starting to paint the doom and gloom. Have you guys seen that as well? Roger, especially, across the pond there. Are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely, Mark. And it's interesting. I did see an article about New York. In fact, I think they're still only back up to about sort of 50%, I think, or something from pre-pandemic. But there's an interesting study just done here in UK on rail travel, and Savills, the real estate people, because they were looking at housing and that, have said that they've done a study of all the train stations and stuff like that, and where there's now more traffic from pre-pandemic is that people are moving out about an hour from London. because they're only coming in about 3 times a week. And so people are moving out, for houses. And I think also there's another thing saying that that people, won't have the finance in place to keep some of these buildings going. At the end of maybe about another year or 18 months could be a real issue. And that, the intent will be to sort of not try and put out too much effort into buildings that were pre-1980.
Yeah, that's
looking
what-
at repurposing, but I do, there's certainly reports everywhere, Mark, saying that people are rethinking, and that a number of companies are even actually saying, don't come into the office Monday or Friday. It's shut.
Yeah, and this person, I actually had a call with a economist, fairly well-known one. And his view was this, is that we're still in a denial phase, basically, for the next 12 months, as he puts it. Then he says, after that, for the 2 to 3 years after that, it could be hell as far as corporate real estate and, the lending and all that kind of good stuff. And so at this point, that's his view, but it could change, you never know. But I thought it was interesting that he said that for the remaining part of this, for the next 12 months, it's sort of that denial phase. And then should see, some changes or whatever, the crap hit the fan possibly in, 2 to 3 years. So
I think the new build will take a hit, but hopefully retrofit and refurbishment should flourish a bit. Because there's still going to be the same amount of people going in on a Wednesday, even if they're not turning up on Monday and Friday.
and there's a lot of new drivers driving the technology anyway. So, Go ahead, Anto. Anno, sorry.
No, I was just going to comment. I'm not charging anyone today for the mix-up. Sorry. Interestingly enough, one of the other metrics I'm tracking to that same perspective, Roger, is the sort of the IoT companies, right? In that there was there was a large number of them that came and popped out, pre-COVID, and became successful and stuff. I'm starting to get a smell and a sense for some of them struggling a little bit, and and starting to fail on their valuations of what they are, and looking for additional funding rounds and stuff, which to me is a bit of an early indicator of property owners putting off initiatives, right? Because the IoT guys, from my perspective, they are a bit of a leading edge parameter of adoption of technologies in buildings, because they're quicker to install and faster. Most of them are lick and stick type sensors and devices, right?
And I think with that, Anno, is that I think they're saying there's still money for seed funding. It's the people going back for the B and C rounds,
second and third rounds,
they're
right?
not getting the money, and they're the ones that are suddenly going to run into a brick wall.
Right. And they were sort of the early darlings, right? When everything was all hot and heavy and everything else. So, they tend to be an early indicator, because they're typically quick projects, right? If someone commits to an IoT project, you can commit to it, funding and execution, in a pretty short time compared to longer term BAS type projects, right?
Do they tend to be OpEx projects more than CapEx?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, those are the kinds of things where, they just put it on a credit card. They don't even need to go through a CapEx cycle or bidding or any of that kind of a thing. So,
yeah, which is why I've got a close eye on them, because they're an indicator to me of if the OpEx type projects start to drop off a little bit, that's just another what's going on.
Yep.
Story. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to share back to the subject matter, of course, that we've got is the cloud, smart, the value of the cloud as it relates to what we're doing. Unfortunately, I wasn't here last week either. I was out, so I didn't really track a lot of this. I'm assuming we covered this more from a technology perspective, and I think today we're going to talk more about what's the value proposition from a business perspective. Am I in the right ballpark?
Yep.
I want to kick off, and I'm going to wrap two pieces together, and I'm going to sort of drag the cloud and the ChatGPT thing together and something else that I've been kicking around as an interesting concept. And for those of you who've been in the startup world in this space, in the prop tech space, and if you remember back in the early days, well before we had things like cloud computing, before we had AWSs and Google Clouds and Azures and things, and if you're trying to do a startup in this space, of course, you'd go to the VC and you'd ask them for, $5 million worth of seed funding or so. And the first thing you would do is spend $3 million worth on infrastructure and servers and security and networking and access and all this sort of good fundamental infrastructure. And of course, what happened was cloud computing, Azure, the Amazons came about, and then the startup company would now go back to the VC and say, I'm starting a new company and I only need $2 million because I don't need to spend $3 million on infrastructure and servers, and because I can just go to Azure and get going. So I don't need as much and I can get going faster. My extension to the model, of course, now is ChatGPT can actually build code for you. And now you can go to the VC and go, I only need $1 million because I already have the cloud. And now I have a team of software developers called ChatGPT-1 and ChatGPT-2 and ChatGPT-3. And I just need to get after the development. So in some concept, for those of you who were in the space, the cloud, the advent of cloud to, especially as a startup company, especially in the prop tech or IoT space, was a big deal because the amount of money that you were needing to get started on and to start executing. And you couple that with, and again, I'm just on my hobby horse of the IoT companies, you couple that with what the large cloud providers provided IoT companies. They recognized pretty much early on that IoT was one of the ways that they were going to get, large penetration. Cloud was going to get large penetration into the built environment. So they offered all sorts of exciting tools, right? Like, Azure's IoT hub and all the. We'll let Rick answer his phone. But they offered, they immediately jumped on the bandwagon, and there was so many IoT tools that the cloud providers, gave you, from gateways to parsers to hubs to databases. And so, if you were doing an IoT play, not only was it easy to get started, but the number of tools that they provided, made the play significantly better. So from if you're doing this, a business value from a startup environment is, I can get going, and they're very good at giving you I describe them a little bit like drug dealers, right? The first few are free, just try them, it's all good, it's going to be great, and as soon as you got hooked, the deeper you got hooked onto an Azure or a Google or an Amazon infrastructure, especially in the IoT space, the more and more you felt you couldn't disassociate yourself from that particular platform.
But isn't that kind of not dissimilar to the Dollar Shave Club type thing, where a handful of guys got together and pulled products from Korea? They get somebody else to distribute it. They don't have any R&D ventures. Essentially, they come up with the concept and the marketing, and therefore it's allowing you to exploit your business idea and not get weighed down by all the periphery bits around you. It's the same sort of thing, allowing you at least to drive that through rather than focus on perhaps all the other bits that, as you said, they needed infrastructure and stores and distribution and other stuff. So I think it's just making life easier if you've got those concepts to be able to actually realize it.
Just now in the last 2 weeks, I've had two 3 different business owners who do software come out publicly and state tools like this are going to allow me to have fewer programmers, significantly fewer programmers on my staff to get the same amount of work done.
Or it will, maybe the more adventurous ones will be able to actually say, hey, we can produce more in the same amount.
Well,
of time.
yeah, and remember,
like-
if you're writing even a simple routine, 100 lines of code or something like that, that's measured in hours for a good programmer. It's measured in seconds.
Yep.
When ChatGPT is generating the code.
But is it any different, Tracy, the moving from a logbook to a slide rule to a calculator to all the other things? It just allows you to progress and not deal with all the other
Yep.
stuff below it and go and move on quicker.
Yep.
Do more.
This is every day I think of some new way to use a conversational AI tool to make things more efficient. Right? You can even drop your financials into ChatGPT and tell it to analyze them like a financial analyst. And it will give you bullet points back. I haven't done that one yet. I got to try it, but I just heard an AI expert say that he's been doing that with ChatGPT for some time now.
But as long as you don't do what the 2 Samsung engineers did, right? You guys track that one?
No.
So if you haven't, another capability because ChatGPT is debug your code. And in fact, I'll send you guys a link to an article I read just last week, where a guy wrote, he's a software support engineer for a fairly large organization. And his business is to support, fix bugs in their platform as they get, produced by the users. And the way he describes it, his typical day is he gets, he goes to his ADO or whatever, he gets his bug list, he starts with the top of the bug and he reads the description of the bug and he gets the relevant code and he has to run through and simulate it and try and find through the code. And the example he gave was something about a text not being converted to dollars and cents correctly or something. And then you have to debug this and you have to find it and then you have to go find the correction to the code. And this will take him anywhere from, 4-8 hours to maybe 2 or 3 days by the time he's run all this. So you try to do the same exercise. He got a lump of code, put it into ChatGPT. Not only did it find the error, it also suggested to him the correction for the error, gave him the correction for the error, and did all this in sub-seconds, right? Which typically would have taken him 2 to 3 days. Well, apparently a couple of zealous Samsung engineers took this to heart, but unfortunately dumped all of Samsung's IP on ChatGPT in the process of doing that. Back to one of Jim's statements, which if you're working for any large corporation like I do, immediately generated a whole bunch of internal advice from legal saying, do not put your company intellectual property code onto ChatGPT to help debug your issues. So, Jim I know this has been one of Jim's mantras. And yeah, so apparently 2 Samsung engineers had done this and apparently are no longer with the company.
Yeah.
Okay, because I guess going back to Mark's comment there, we probably should be moving back onto the cloud.
Yeah.
Business bit.
So I was going to join the 2 up in a little bit, Mark. Do you think the pervasiveness of cloud and what we are doing with ChatGPT if you had a cloud solution, would this not be just an accelerator for you if you're very cloud centric?
Who you asking?
Anybody?
That's definitely a good question. I don't know enough, because I guess for right now, I'm looking at cloud as it relates to managing and operating buildings. Okay, no ChatGPT, no nothing, but just as another resource in which I can manage my building much more efficiently and effectively. And again, like anything else, there's always pros and there's cons. And so, for example, you know, I get this when in conversations with folks about the cloud in the building space, security of data, as an example. I have insufficient resources or expertise at an end user. I have insufficient resources and expertise. The governance side, especially when on the ops side, and what we've always talked about with the IT side, cost management, trying to manage multi-cloud environments, compliance issues, vendor lock-in. I don't want to be locked in to a vendor. And a lot of this is coming from a voice of customer research we just completed about 35 days ago. Data ownership. And again, is who owns the data. As a operator, I want to make sure I own the data, and we've discussed this over a couple times in previous conversations. Is you think you own the data, but do you really own that data? And then finally, cloud integration and cloud interoperability. So these are, you know, from the concern side. And again, everything has positives and concerns. So
On the cloud, I'm sorry, the data ownership question, as it relates to the cloud, right? Do you think that the data ownership has become more of a relevant question to owners because of cloud? Or does it even, I mean, if I had a server on site and I had my own technicians, we don't know that the technicians aren't helping themselves to the data on a memory stick when they leave. Is it just that cloud's made it easier and therefore a bigger concern? Has data ownership always been a problem, I guess is my question, or has the cloud just made it worse or better, whichever?
You know, it's interesting. I had a discussion with one of our partners just this morning, actually, and with the customer set that they in industries they typically work in, data ownership is a big important thing, right? It's always a discussion up front, major part of the onboarding, education process, and so forth. In the spaces where we work a lot, which is the small box kind of retail stuff, restaurants and so forth, it rarely comes up. Hardly anyone has ever asked us about that. You know, we don't have a lot of documents that we make people sign. You know, if anyone asks, you know, you own the data, you can have the data, you can do whatever you want, and we state we'll never reveal this to anyone else without your permission, kind of thing. But otherwise, it's not a big deal. And we haven't, early on, 8 years ago, let's say, we were asked occasionally when we were doing some international stuff, we were asked, where's the data stored, right? Is it in my country or in the US? And there seemed to be consistency, like even Canada or Asia and in Europe, that they just didn't want it stored on US soil. That was the common thread, right? It wasn't so much it needs to be in my country, even just not in the US, because our laws, you know, terrorist laws and so forth are so far reaching that they were nervous about that. But I haven't even heard that in a long time. So
I would second that, Tracy. You know, I've been in the analytics business for 25 plus years now. And in the earlier days, we had more questions about data ownership than we have now. Our overall policy is what it is now, what it has been for the last 25 years, which is that in aggregate, we own the database so that we can do anything with it, but that the customer owns their own data. So anything that is a derived work from the data or any algorithms that we figure out generally becomes our intellectual property. And any data that is stored is their confidential data, not to be disclosed. In the history of the business, we offer to give people the data if they leave as a customer. I think 0 times in the history of the business has anyone asked for their data, maybe once, but never been a big deal, getting to be
Same.
less of a big deal than it was.
Yeah, same with us, our experience.
Guys, let me weigh in on this, on the value of from a business perspective of cloud. So the fact that, particularly from the standpoint of what ChatGPT is able to do in terms of lowering the cost of product development. When Roger brought up the example of the shaving club and how a business can basically go out with a concept and find out whether the concept is going to fly or not, and not have to do the rest of the work. The analogy the comparison I draw from cloud computing and ChatGPT is we're now in a position to go test market an idea much faster and for much lower cost before we invest traditional amounts of money on product development to find out if anybody wants to buy it. And we can iterate these concepts at a fraction of the cost of what we would otherwise have had to do traditionally. So from that standpoint, I think cloud combined with AI technology is going to really help any industry test market its ideas with essentially beta level products that customers can use at a low price and a low cost to the development team. And that's a really good thing because we won't have to necessarily wait years to get it right through multiple revisions, Rev 1, Rev 2, and so on. And I think I really see this as a big plus for our industry and any industry, but we struggle to develop any kind of an automation product from an R&D standpoint because it's expensive. And so that's the point I wanted to raise.
Yeah, and I think taking it back to what Mark and Hanno was saying earlier, I think a lot of the startups and the people who are going to benefit from this are obviously those that are going to offering the soft services or the services to the customers, because a lot of it's going to be a hardware based, so it's going to be the cloud services and what they can really do for the customer with the data that has been collected, provided that's available to those that want to. And then it becomes a matter of, can you share it between customers to gain the benefit, be more transparent and open. And that's where, to Mark's question, there's a benefit if the customer allows access to the data, which is also access to other customers, then you've got a bigger pool of information to actually make your decisions on. But it kind of, that's where I see it.
I agree, Roger, to amplify Steve's point. I think that's kind of where I was going with the ChatGPT. Wasn't that it was? I think the fact that it's going to have such an effect is going to lock in the cloud business going forward, right? I think that we kind of, the cloud was kind of in and out. It was a big buzz, then it kind of faded away, and then it's kind of tracked. And it's because that and especially Microsoft and Azure, of course, and the others are going to catch up at a great rate of knots. I think it's because they're going to be providing these development tools and development environments, which they're going to very tightly integrate into their cloud environments, just like the IoT tools that they gave us. They're going to integrate, which is just going to lock us into cloud only. It'll be a really hard proposition from my perspective now to go back to something that's not cloud, because this ChatGPT model, the AI model, is now locked in significantly. Back to Roger's point, Roger's 100% right. I can do proof of concept complete, from woe to go in such a short time that I would not even think about ever doing it off the cloud environment, especially when Microsoft is going to just embedded into the tools of the cloud environment in the first place.
But to me,
So-
I know the whole thing with the cloud and what Mark was talking about and the business aspect. I think we've all been there with the PC that on-prem that was in the basement with 500 alarms because the electrician got the job of looking after it. Now, because of the cloud, you're actually putting data in the hands of people that know what to do with it. So when you look at the people on here, a number of you guys are actually in the business of providing services to customers because you get access to their data off-prem and you're doing it for them on multiple buildings. And so you're kind of moving that data from site where it used to reside into the cloud. So, you've got those experts or those people that are providing services off-prem and the customer must benefit from that.
I would like to point out, though, that the economic model that the cloud was based on originally was basically scaling up web traffic.
Right.
So if I have a lot of consumer websites that need very quick scalability, whether it's concert ticket sales or e-commerce, whatever it might be, what the cloud provided was almost unlimited and seamless scalability at a fairly reasonable cost. Notwithstanding the IoT tools that Anno mentioned, the problem is that in our business, we have the opposite problem. We have 3 users and tens and thousands of data points, rather than tens of thousands of users and 3 data points. And it's been my experience that the pricing models for cloud haven't been particularly advantageous for what we do, as they're still basically stuck in providing that scalability for consumer e-commerce websites. So late into our business, we're heavy users of the cloud. On our military and government business, where we need to have the safety seal from Amazon Web Services for GovCloud to use, but our regular customers are still operating on our own data centers and our own cloud because it's so much cheaper. So we'll see.
Let me ask you about, the fact that cloud architectures are really the technology du jour, and your software engineers want to work in that kind of environment, and with portability being possible with containerization, are you not designing your software to take advantage of the architecture of cloud computing?
We are going forward. We're very interested, and we're working along with Anto and the IBB group on this cloud native approach to architecting our next generation of technology. And we see the industry moving in that direction, Steve.
Yeah. Okay.
But right now, that doesn't really impinge upon the business model of when I get a bill from Amazon.
No, I agree. I fully agree with you on that. The economics aren't there.
The other thing that we've found too is once you go to one of those type of clouds, right, AWS or Azure, not all things cloud are AWS and Azure, I understand, but as opposed to servers at a data center, your margins become effectively fixed, right? Mm-hmm. So the more you scale, your margin stays the same. The split between your revenue and your costs tend to scale 1-to-1, right? More volume, more throughput, more data storage, which are, 2 of the primary cost factors on some of these platforms. And you have no even opportunity to scale with a fixed cost structure because your costs go up as you scale.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So to Jim's point, I don't think the cloud, when people say cloud and they think Azure, AWS in its traditional sense is always the right answer here.
And that's when we were talking about the cloud architectures last week when Toby was on, he was really focused on the future, which is that cloud native architecture that Steve was referencing. And we talked about this on one of the calls, is that when we talk about cloud of yesteryear, it was mostly just putting files somewhere else. That was the whole thing. The scale of storing photos or Facebook messages in the cloud was sort of the design point. And, think about cloud architectures. It really was Facebook that drove that. And then it was very much oriented, the internet as we know it was oriented around people. To Jim's point about thousands of users of one file instead of 3 users of thousands of data points. And that's the fundamental notion, what Toby was talking about last week about cloud native environments, is that the internet is evolving to new architectures that are actually made for machines to talk or for systems to talk to each other. And I don't know that that's one of the things at the coalition, we're going to step back and we're going to actually do some sessions on just the fundamentals of what we're talking about here, of what's changing. And that storing files on the internet was neat and that was fun, but it really didn't do anything for the productivity of B2B or for system to system. And the internet needs actually a fundamental rework for systems and for computers to talk to each other. Now that we have enough processing and communication and cheap storage, cheap processing, we can rethink the architectures, which means we can rethink the economics, which is what Jim said, going forward, they're looking at that.
But I think that's the key point, though, that Rick, that Jim was focused on, I have to agree, is that the business models of the cloud providers have not yet in that stage. They're still, the way that you pay for stuff today is not aligned with the new models. And in fact, the classic one that I always run is, sure, if all your tens of thousands of data points are within AWS and you're fully working within the AWS environment, it's one thing. The moment I stepped out, so AWS can go and change their business model to say, yes, it's upside down now. It's more data out. It's more about sensors and less about people. But the moment I try to connect my Azure to somebody's, Google Cloud and start to transfer those thousands and tens of thousands of data between those clouds, which is another whole dimension to the problem, right? That I think is to be TBD.
But that's what cloud native is looking to do. And cloud native is it's a real thing. It's part of the Linux Foundation. And so what does that bring to mind? First of all, Linux is about freeing the data and doing more open source things and allowing for innovation. And that's why they're working on that architecture to be able to give guidance to, so that we don't get trapped in that. Why does my cable bill keep going up? Dynamic. Because
why am I streaming? I went to streaming TV and now I'm paying more than my original service was, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
well, I was going to say that's one of the things we want to. We're going to focus on some of the fundamental issues of what is making the technology different. If nothing else, for the younger generation of entrepreneurial thinkers that are thinking of where can I go do some innovative stuff? It's like, come on into our domain. We need you. And, start up a company that's using these new technologies and that's leveraging all the good stuff that others have done ahead of you. Come in here, bring your new ways of thinking, new technology, and, help us innovate here.
I was just going to say, you did remind me is something I heard a while ago, which is, the using cloud platforms for what we do, the traditional ones like Azure and AWS and so forth, is very in line with streaming TV, right? It used to be you paid one fixed price, no matter how much TV you watched, you knew exactly what your bill was going to be every month. Now, if you're consuming things that you're paying for, it varies based on your usage, right? And that's more in line with the model that these cloud platforms offer when you go down that path, right? Variable cost on variable usage. And manufacturers like us don't like that. We'd like to have a known
I was going to say, right.
Yeah, be able to scale up revenue accordingly, profits accordingly.
Well, we just had a real life example of where a customer is using a cellular modem and the data system decided to, well, I won't get into too many of the details, but it decided to start transferring a lot more data than what was expected, and to the tune of like $20,000 worth of charges that were unexpected. And it was because of some, whether it was error correcting or just oversampling or whatever. But the point is, we don't know how much data our machines need to use. It's like when we're watching a replay of the Super Bowl. Yes, we know exactly what that's going to take in terms of a download, but we don't know what our machines are using or some of our software is going to use. And it's not scalable, to your point earlier, Tracy. But new architectures and new business models, they're going to evolve. And
I do worry, to Jim's point, I do worry that the business models are going to lag on the technology implementations, right? Is that,
Well,
how fast will they adopt?
and they may never adopt to our industry because we represent that much to them,
Yeah.
right? So they'll always go after the majority of their users, which are consumer level applications, not smart buildings. Right?
I think
Which is one of the reasons there has never been a large company that has come into this space from a technological standpoint. Space is too small for them.
Right.
To make the kind of money they normally do. So I just want to tell you, we're all safe here.
Excellent. That's a
GE dipped in
Yeah.
and then rapidly got out, didn't they?
So Jim Lee, can I send out an email to everybody I know? Jim Lee says we're safe, so.
Probably not, Mark, but I thought it was worth the humor
No, but
anyways.
I think you're right on as far as the models. The models haven't changed, and Anno, to kind of just get on your horse there too, is that, yeah, I think it's going to be a long time before those models change. It's almost like the mobile cell phone and mobile, how they started out with data, they charge you an arm and a leg, then they went to unlimited, so forth and so on. Is this kind of, we've got a journey when it comes to the cloud, and especially for our industry. So.
Which, yeah, and my summary of all that, interestingly enough, is echoing Jim's point a little bit. It's clever folks that you see here that have kind of worked to circumvent. I mean, a lot of times we end up circumventing a lot of those business models that the cloud people, so we could become very creative on how to go around some of those barriers that they put in place.
Well, we're going to try and figure out how to make it faster. Okay. So I'm going to be the optimist and say we're going to speed it up. So if there's anybody that's got ideas of how, we're going to push to try and speed it up, because there's work to be done. There's a lot of young people that are looking to try and figure out where they can go to work, and they don't like the sound of it's going to take a long time. I get it, but if we can see where it's going, and Gordon Moore just died 2 weeks ago, Moore's Law, we can see where technology is going. We've been able to see where it is going. We owe it to the next generation to try and figure out how to make it go faster. And that's my soapbox.
That's Brian's just.
I think
Brian Turner's just mentioned, saying, we're trying to catch up and go as fast as we can. This is an iterative thing, much the same as you were saying about mobile phones and TV and everything. We're at the beginning of this stuff really in our industry, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it all pans out over the next couple of years.
I think we're gonna cross the line of acceleration for sure. Sorry, Anna.
No, you're fine. Last one.
Yeah, I just said, I think we've crossed the line of acceleration. We're there because with AI and the rate at which stuff is getting adopted now and moving, there's no question this is going to kick into high gears from my view of the world, at least.
We're on our way. We're on our way.
So on that note, I'll thank you all for your time and appreciate everybody turning up, and we wish Anto a speedy recovery as well. So we'll look forward to talking to you guys next week.
Good pinch hitting job, Anno.
Yeah, last one. Got an innings.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Be
guys.
good, everybody.
Yeah.